Hello, my name is Miss Zoe and I am a Youth Development Leader at the Ragsdale YMCA. Today I'm going to be reading Thidwick, the Big-Hearted Moose by Dr. Seuss. Okay, I'm going to start reading and I'm going to read the page first and then I will show the pictures as I go on. Okay. Up at Lake Winnebago, the far northern shore, lives a huge herd of moose, about 60 or more. And they all go around in a big happy bunch, looking for nice, tender moose moss to munch. Up at Lake Winnebago, one day they were lunching, just strolling along and enjoying their munching. For the moose moss that day was especially fine, when it happened that Thidwick, the last moose in line, saw a bingle bug sitting. The bug called out, "Hey, it's such a long road and it's such a hot day. Would you mind if I rode on your horns for the way?" "Of course not," smiled Thidwick, the big-hearted moose. "I'm happy my antlers can be of some use. There's room to spare and I'm happy to share. Be my guest and I hope that you're comfortable there." So the bingle bug picked out a nice easy seat and the moose went looking for moose moss to eat. Well, an hour or so later, the bug heard a squeak, and he heard the small voice of a tree spider speak. "I say," said the spider, "you've got a fine place. That moose seems quite friendly and such a nice face. If I got on too, do you think he would mind?" "Hop aboard," laughed the bug, "and I think you'll find the moose won't object. He's the big-hearted kind." "I accept," said the spider with joy and delight, and he started a web on the horn to the right. While the spider was spinning, he heard a gay song, and a fresh little zinazoo bird came along. He stopped and he stared and he chirped, "Well, well, well, what a smart place to build, what a great place to dwell. I've been living on trees ever since I was born, but here's something new, why not live on a horn?" "If there's room for two, then there's room for three. There's plenty of room," laughed the bug, "and it's for free." Thidwick stopped walking. What was all that talking? These guests had caught Thidwick the moose unawares. "Hey," he called out, "what goes on there upstairs?" "Just building a nest, sir," the zinazoo said, and began yanking hairs out of poor Thidwick's head. And he plucked out exactly 204. "Don't worry," he laughed, "you can always grow more." Then he dozed off to sleep in his fine moose hair nest. "This bird," murmured Thidwick, "is sort of a pest. But I'm a good sport, so I'll just let him rest, for a host above all must be nice to his guests." Besides, now it's getting quite late in the day, and surely tomorrow they'll all go away. But alas, the next morning the sun's early light brought to Thidwick's sad eyes the most unwelcome sight. "Meet my wife," said the bird. "I was married last night, and perhaps, by the way, I should mention to you, too, that her uncle is coming to live with us, too. You're a very fine host, so I knew you'd be willing." Then the uncle of woodpeckers started in drilling. All Thidwick's friends shouted, "Get rid of those pests." "I would, but I can't," sobbed poor Thidwick. "They're guests." "Guests indeed," his friends answered, and all of them frowned. "If those were your guests, we don't want you around. You can't stay with us because you're not of our sort," and they all turned their backs and walked off with a snort. Now your big friendless moose walked out alone and forlorn, with 4 great big woodpecker holes in his horn. "What holes?" whispered Herman, a squirrel who spied on him. "What holes to hide nuts in? Mind if I tried 'em?" "They're yours," called the woodpecker. "Get right inside 'em. The big-hearted moose runs a public hotel. Bring your nuts, bring your wife, bring your children as well." So the whole squirrel family all jumped in, pell-mell. And the very next thing the poor animal knew, a bobcat and a turtle were living there too. Now, what was the big-hearted moose going to do? Well, what would you do if that happened to you? You couldn't say scat because that wouldn't be right. You couldn't scram because that isn't polite. A host has to put up with all kinds of pests, for a host above all must be nice to his guests. So you would try hard to smile and you'd look too sweet, and you'd go right on looking for moose moss to eat. But now it was winter, and that wasn't easy, for moose moss gets scarce when the weather gets freezy. The food was gone on the cold north shore of Lake Winnebago. There was just no more. And all of Thidwick's friends swam away in a bunch to the south of the lake where the moose moss is to munch. He watched the herd leaving, and then Thidwick knew he'd starve if he stayed here. He'd have to go too. He stepped in the water, then oh, what a fuss. "Stop," screamed his guests. "You can't do this to us. These horns are our home, and you've no right to take our home to the far distant side of the lake." "Be fair," Thidwick begged, with a lump in his throat. "We're fair," said the bug. "We'll decide this by vote. All of those in favor of going say A. All of those in favor of staying say nay." "A," doubted Thidwick. But when he was done, "Nay," they all yelled. He even lost to one. "We win," screamed the guests, "by a very large score," and poor starving Thidwick climbed back on the shore. Then do you know what those pests did? They asked in some more. They asked in a fox who jumped in from the trees. They asked in some mice, and they asked in some fleas. They asked in a big bear, and then, if you please, came a swarm of 362 bees. Poor Thidwick sank down with a groan onto his knees, and then something that made his heart freeze. Bullets came zinging right past Thidwick's face. Guns were bang-banging all over the place. "Get that moose! Get that moose!" Thidwick heard a voice call. "Fire again and again and shoot straight, one and all. We must get his head for the Harvard Club wall." Thidwick took to his heels with that load on his head. With 500 pounds on his horns, the moose fled. He could have run faster without all those pests, but a host above all must be nice to his guests. Up canyon, off cliff, over wild rocky trail, with bullets banging, bouncing around him like hail. Up gully, through gulch, and down slippery sluice, with his hard-headed guest raced these soft-hearted moose. They finally had him. Because of those pests, he ran out of luck. Because of those guests on his horn, he was stuck. He gasped. He felt faint, and the whole world grew fuzzy. Thidwick was finished completely. Or was he? Finished? Not Thidwick. Decidedly not. It's true, he was in the most terrible spot. But now he remembered a thing he forgot. A wonderful something that happens each year to the horns of all moose and the horns of all deer. Today was the day, Thidwick happened to know. The old horns came off so that new ones could grow. And he called to the pests of his horns as he threw them. You wanted my horns, now you're quite welcome to them. Keep them, they're yours. As for me, I should take myself to the far distant side of the lake. And he swam Winnebago and found his old bunch, just in time for a wonderful lunch at the south of the lake where there was moose moss to bunch. His old horns today are where you knew they would be. His guests are still on them, all stuffed as they should be. The end. I hope that you liked Thidwick the Big-Hearted Moose by Dr. Seuss. It is a fantastic book. So to recap about the book, Thidwick had a really, really big heart, which means that he wanted to make others really happy, and it could mean that they could be really happy, but he would be really sad. So he did things for the pests on his horns that he didn't want to do, and that allowed him to miss out on things with his herd, which didn't make him too happy. So I challenge you to be a big-hearted kid and do something kind for somebody else, but make sure that you are doing it out of the kindness of your heart